What would you do if your government decided to aid a less wealthy country? You may believe that your nation would suffer, but when China opted to aid Africa, it had other ideas and wouldn't suffer a financial loss. Are you curious how? How can a continent that is regarded as perpetually impoverished repay China's favor? We're going to view China's brand new $130 billion initiative with Africa in this video. We'll also learn why China is making such large investments in the transformation of Africa. Let's get started. And does this Africa require assistance? Can it, however, also provide something in return? In the past, many nations were undervalued by other, more powerful ones. Yet today, we'd observe that those states are having trouble competing with the countries who have traditionally had the upper hand. But consider this: as a nation suffered and developed, the nations who assisted the nation in bad times profited the most. Consider China as an example. China dealt with their crisis admirably. Several countries opposed China, but others also supported her, and you can still see China standing behind such nations now when they are in crisis. Hence, in the 21st century, we must realize that aiding a country is preferable to imposing sanctions. Positive thinking is preferable. Africa requires aid. Nothing can help it more as it develops than standing by it when it needs assistance. Let's re-ask this. What does Africa require more than finances, technology, and infrastructure? The most important thing Africa requires is an ally. We are discussing a continent with 54 nations. This vast area requires a companion. Also, given the worth of Africa, having it as a friend is a fortunate opportunity. Who, though, will have the opportunity to deal with Africa? This inquiry has a very polite response. Africa is a very populous continent, as we all know. It has several sizable nations. And it's not simply that natural resources can be found in Africa. It is the center for oil and other valuables. Africa cannot allow any country to do projects there or use its resources just because it is not developed. It won't be incorrect to observe that powerful nations prey on Africa. It is frail, but its worth is unfathomable. As a result, if Africa chooses to sign agreements with a nation, that nation must be extremely genuine with Africa. And only China has a track record of keeping positive ties with other countries. The reasons Africa picked China will be endless if we can figure them out. But first, let's quickly go through the list. China can firstly add value. It has the ability to build. That may work to Africa's advantage. Not to mention, it can prevent Africa from becoming another nation. Hence, selecting China as a friend is unquestionably wise. You may watch additional movies or participate in other conversations regarding the many projects that China has done with African countries. But we're going to speak about a program that's making a difference in Africa today. One of them is the railway project that will cost $130 billion. Railroads have the potential to be very profitable for a nation. Also, Africa demanded that. Transportation on the local level is one of the most important factors in economic development. A country that also has a better local transportation infrastructure is something that the citizens demand. Only a handful of people in Africa are now seated inside the vehicle. The vast majority of residents are forced to travel on foot to reach their varied destinations. So, the availability of trains might prove to be rather advantageous for them. The deserts of Africa may be reached from Greenland through Tanami by way of 3 fairly significant railroads in Africa. Now that we've covered the basics, let's talk about them in further depth. The first form of railway was the railroad. The people of Nigeria benefited from the construction of this railroad, which was done there. The whole construction of this project cost China $1.6 billion. However, the majority of the population believes that the money was well spent. The movement of goods from one city to another is now a straightforward process. When commodities such as fruits and vegetables were shipped, it would take many days for them to arrive at their destination. As a result, the final product's quality would degrade. But with the existence of a railway, this is no longer applicable. It is the second most major railroad that China built for Africa, and it is called the Yaji Railway. The construction of this railway in China set the country back $4.5 billion and spanned a distance of 750 kilometers. This railroad establishes a connection between Ethiopia and Djibouti. This particular railway is one of the ones that has been beneficial to both countries. To begin, it has significantly improved the quality of life for locals and bolstered the economy of Africa. In addition, this railway acts as an advertising on a global scale for the great construction skills of China. As the building was completed, China became the recipient of other infrastructure projects from other countries. China has now completed its third railroad project on the African continent with the completion of the Mombasa-Nairobi line. This railroad was purchased by China for $4 billion. In 2018, when the building was finally constructed, there was an enormous surge of users that caused all prior use records to be broken within the first month. During just a month, more than 10,000 people traveled utilizing this method. The magnitude of this crowd, though, indicates how little these people required the train in their daily lives. The first year after it had first opened its doors, the railroad's occupancy rate was at 95% at all times. After witnessing this, think about how many people were in desperate need of this railway. Quite a few countries in Africa couldn't wait for China to finish constructing their railways for them. These are only a few of the several railways that we spoke about. It is impossible to count the number of major railways that China has built for Africa. Moreover, the overall investment amounts to more than $130 billion. Nonetheless, an essential question arises here. Why is China operating in such a way, since Africa is a developing continent that is highly unlikely to be able to reciprocate China's favor? Therein is the beginning of the exciting section. The support that China provides to Africa is not wanted by the nations of the West. They claim that China is wasting its money and that this would result in Africa continuing to be destitute. Yet, it would be wrong to say that people in Africa would continue to live in poverty based on the statistics and efforts that have been made by Africans. What if I told you that the West didn't truly mean what they said? How would you react to that? The industrialization of Africa is inevitable, and with it will come a deepening of China's relations to the continent. And this is precisely what the Western world hopes to prevent happening. Earlier, we discussed the significance of Africa as a country, as well as the benefits of cultivating relationships with Africans at the beginning of the film. The worth that Africa possesses is sufficient to win a country's friendship even before that country has developed. It possesses a substantial quantity of both gas and oil. Energy is the new kind of currency. In light of this, despite the continent's widespread poverty, Africa is home to some of the world's most valuable natural resources. Africa holds a high regard for China. China is well aware that it will not take advantage of its riches in any way. They are consequently moving in the direction of forming a fruitful collaboration. China stands to benefit much from this relationship, which will also radically alter Africa in the process. And this is exactly what the Western world hopes to prevent happening. Thus, it is attempting to disguise its intentions by asserting that Africa will always be in a state of poverty. Share your opinion in comments. Also, click on this video to watch about another shocking project.